What attracted you to the role of autism expert? I have a degree in autism studies, and I believe that I have all the skills required for the role. What attracted you to the role of autism expert? I have 43 years' experience of being autistic, and I want to help other autistic people. Oh, that's brilliant news. I can't wait to start. Hello, I hope you're well. You might be wondering why I'm making a video about rejection from an autistic point of view. The reason is that, yet again, I've been rejected for the Glastonbury Festival. Now, I'm not a rock star, a pop star, as you will have gathered from watching my videos, or at least one of them. Now, I've been rejected for the poetry stage. I've applied several times over the years in the vain hope that I might be considered to perform at Glastonbury, which obviously would be a massive thrill. But no, I've been turned down again, and was feeling sorry for myself while I was thinking about this going for a run. And I thought, well, let's make the most of it. I can make a video and put it on YouTube and get some sympathy from people. But that's not the real reason. Hopefully you'll watch this video and think, actually, I'm not the only autistic person that struggles with rejection. There's something here for me. It's relatable. So I've got some notes as usual. I'm going to try and make this quite a breezy and obviously very interesting video. And like I said, hopefully it's relevant, relatable. So yeah, Glastonbury was the main motivation for me making this video. I mean, I could, stop applying and just get on with my life. But I love poetry and I love performing, believe it or not, being in the public eye, performing a structured set of monologues, aka a poetry set. So I do enjoy performing. I enjoy making these videos. It's a controlled environment. Being on stage is a controlled environment unless you get people heckling, which I've had once, but I dealt with it in true rock and roll fashion. I put them in their place. So yeah, I maybe should just get on with my life and not apply to perform at Glastonbury because it's for people who actually know what they're doing. But I think part of being autistic is being resilient and tenacious and trying to prove people wrong. And I probably am going to keep applying to perform there. And maybe one day they'll let me on the stage and I can share my silly poems and I can say, look at me, I performed at Glastonbury. So yeah, Glastonbury, maybe one day. And linked to that is a time when I got turned down. My poetry collection got turned down for publication. I've got the name of the publisher on my notes, but I'm actually not going to mention them because I won't want anyone associated with the publisher to feel uncomfortable about my whinge. I mean, they're a small publishing company, 2 or 3 people running it, maybe more these days, because the rejection I'm about to describe was 6 years ago. And I really was probably overconfident about me being considered for publication. But I had worked on these poems over a period of years. I'd road tested them at poetry gigs. They seemed to have gone well. Not all of the poems that I'd hoped to be published, but quite a few of them. I'd read them at poetry gigs, and I got laughs, and people seemed to appreciate them. So I wasn't absolutely certain that my collection would be published, but I thought I had a really good chance. And to get the generic sort of automated rejection, I just did not deal with it well at all. And I was trying to process this rejection while I was at work, and I didn't do very well. And in fact, I had a panic attack. An ambulance turned up, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. I'm sharing it on a YouTube video, but I felt so wounded by this rejection that I was ruminating about it at work. It had a physical impact on me to the point where someone had to call an ambulance. Rather unhelpfully, one of the paramedics asked me if I was having a heart attack, which I don't think is part of the training for a paramedic, because that will only increase someone's anxiety, and it increased mine, I'll tell you that. I did not appreciate that question. But it turned out that I wasn't having a heart attack. I was, experiencing rejection dysphoria. Now, I didn't know this at the time, 6 years ago. I hadn't even heard of rejection dysphoria until maybe 2 years ago. But I can now understand that that's what I was experiencing, and I can relate it to being autistic/ADHD, otherwise known as an ADHD. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria or rejection dysphoria, I've obviously messed up my notes there, is an extreme emotional sensitivity to rejection or criticism. So I'd put a lot of effort and emotional investment in these poems, as silly as the poems were, and to have them turned down for publication was like I'd internalized it as me being a bad poet and a bad person. And lots of people would have been hurt by the rejection, but they would have dealt with it a lot better than I did. And I'd link my inability at that time to deal with that rejection to my neurodivergence. So I started to read about rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or rejection dysphoria. I really ought to have written more accurate notes and better poems. And I read an article about this by someone called Chantal Marshall, and the poem, the article is on a website called Reframing Autism. So I'm just going to quote and share a couple of quotes from the article, which particularly resonated with me and might well resonate with you. So Chantal Marshall wrote, "We tend to have a very critical inner voice, we being ADHD as autistic people. We tend to have a very critical inner voice. This is like having your worst enemy living inside your brain, continually berating you. When we then receive an external criticism or rejection from someone, we react so deeply to it because it seems to confirm the stream of criticism we are already receiving from this inner voice." As I said, I find that very relatable because my internal monologue is constantly doing myself down. I am my own worst enemy. So when I receive rejection, whether it be at work, whether it be in terms of my poems, about a YouTube video, at home, in the family, I get gently teased, banter. I'm really sensitive, and I used to just think that I'm oversensitive, and people have called me that. I'm oversensitive. So to read something like that is really reassuring, although I'm obviously sorry that Chantal Marshall experiences the same feelings associated with rejection. To know that I'm not just oversensitive and that is related to the way that my brain is wired is reassuring, albeit I still have to deal with my inability to deal with rejection in a way that would be more peaceful for myself and not be so harmful to my self-esteem. We become incredibly adept at avoiding or procrastinating due to fear of failure and criticism. This can lead many of us to give up on our goals or simply never even try because we are so afraid of receiving negative feedback or not succeeding, and of the subsequent spiral of emotions. This kind of blew my mind because for the last 2 years since I've learned about ADHD, I've put procrastination down to me having ADHD and being unable to prioritize and complete a task because of something inherent within the ADHD part of my brain. I'd not linked my procrastination down to a fear of disapproval. I'd not done that before. It makes absolute sense to me to not want to finish something, because once you finish something, you're leaving it open for judgment by other people and by yourself. So again, it's reassuring to read something like that, albeit it's a negative thing to read, that I'm not the only one that procrastinates due to a fear of judgment, and judgment from others and judgment by myself. So another thing I want to talk about in terms of rejection is people just cutting me out of their life. That is rejection. And there are a couple of friends who I've alluded to in a previous video at least once, and they just stopped maintaining contact with me. I tried, and I'm terrible at keeping in contact with people, I confess. So I'm being a slight hypocrite here. I want people to stay in contact with me, and yet I'm not very good at keeping in contact with them. But these two friends that I'm alluding to, again, I really care about them. I still do. And I made more of an effort than I normally do to try and keep in contact with them. And they just never responded. And that rejection is deeply wounding to me. And I wonder whether it's something to do with me, something I've done. Do I need to wonder? Because now I know I'm autistic. And I think there's that double empathy problem, which I'll mention again in a few minutes. So I asked people through my community page on my YouTube channel about their thoughts about rejection. And I want to share a couple of comments from BJ Carey. So thank you again for giving me permission. And I think the comments that he shared, which I'm about to share, might possibly resonate with you as much as they did with me. So he said, "The hardest version of rejection I've experienced, especially as an adult, is the feeling that people have found it easy to let me leave. Meaning, if I've stepped away from a group of people for whatever reason, not a single person has ever reached out to say they've missed me or tried to keep me around." I can disappear, and like I've kind of already said, people, they don't wonder where I am. I'm just out of their lives, so no need to keep in touch with me. And you do wonder, well, is it me? Have I done something? Am I a bad person? I'm sure that they wouldn't treat other friends like that, and so on and so on. And so BJ Carey also said, in my head, I imagine people saying to themselves, oh, thank God, once I leave. I almost wish they'd just blatantly attack me so I at least know what they were thinking, feeling. Me too, hence why I'm sharing the quote. And I don't want to be attacked. I've said many times in these videos and in life in general, I hate conflict. I don't want confrontation. I don't want to be attacked. Who does? No one wants to be attacked. But at least when you're attacked, and I'm not talking about physically assaulted, but just verbally told where to go, at least you know where you stand. And that supports the autistic need for clarity. That person doesn't like me, but at least I know now for certain I will stay away from that person. Not that I need to make a conscious effort to do that, because they have made it clear they're going to stay away from me. But at least you know that there's a line there, that, you're on opposite ends of the line, opposite sides of the line, and you can go about your separate lives. But to not quite know why someone has severed the relationship that you had with them, just, disrupted contact indefinitely, to not know the reason for that is really disorientating. So I get absolutely what BJ Carey's just said there. And so, as I've said, for me, it's like I'm not being attacked, but being told that someone doesn't want to stay in contact with you, be your friend anymore, is obviously deeply hurtful and is a massive rejection. But at least you know where you stand and you have clarity. And I've got here that dislike is better than indifference, because dislike acknowledges that we exist, whereas indifference means that we're invisible, and no one wants to be invisible. We all want to be acknowledged. We all want people, our friends and our enemies, I would say, to acknowledge that we are in the world. To be treated as invisible, as not here, is, as I've just said, more wounding than someone actively disliking us, because to actively dislike us is an emotional effort. It's an effort. It's an acknowledgement that we're here. So you might have a different view on that. You might prefer to be treated as being invisible, as a ghost in someone's life, but I prefer to be actively disliked than to be ignored completely. Although I'm starting to doubt that, because I've had some comments on Facebook in particular recently that have been really hurtful, linked to the genocide. In fact, one of them was, I say it's hurtful, in fact I'm obviously amused by it because I'm kind of semi-smiling. Someone obviously got really ticked off by my persistent defense of my view on the genocide and the fact that a genocide is actually happening despite people's denial. And this guy had obviously Googled me and said that I was a failed poet, which is true and funny. So fair play for finding that out. And I've already told you that I'm a failed poet, because I've been refused to perform at Glastonbury yet again. You might be saying, well, I've been a bit hard on myself. I'm rejecting myself in addition to the rejection I've experienced from other people. Yes, I'm probably being too hard on myself. But for whatever reason, I still haven't figured it out. I find it quite amusing that someone Googled me and then said to me on Facebook, I'm a failed poet, as if that would make me go, oh no, I'm wrong about Gaza. Or maybe it was just him having a parting shot to make himself feel better. Unpleasant behaviour. But again, active dislike, and I'm here, and what am I saying? Thank you for disliking me? No, just thank you for acknowledging that I'm here. Because, I'm autistic, and so often in my life, I felt invisible, ignored completely. And it's one reason why I'm making these YouTube videos, to say I am here, and I'm not just speaking up for me. As an autistic person, I'm speaking up for other autistic people. We are here. We deserve to be acknowledged. We deserve to be treated with kindness. These are our differences. Please accommodate them. So on the theme of rejection, what I'm about to share was inspired by a recent email exchange I had with Arlene at Artist on the Spectrum. So thank you, Arlene, again. My ADHD brain thought, oh, Arlene, Canada, Peach Pit, Canadian band, albeit from the other side of Canada, Vancouver. And I recently was very obsessed with a song by Peach Pit called Black Licorice. And the chorus lyric goes, I'm just black licorice, and all the people that I know would rather leave me in the bowl. I'm not saying that all the people I know would rather leave me in the bowl, but I do absolutely get the sentiment of that lyric. I'm left aside, ignored by people that I know or have known, because some of those people I deeply care about, have left me so to speak, in the bowl, not to be selected. So, yeah, a funny lyric, but contains a sad truth about my autistic experience, and maybe it articulates your own feelings of rejection as an autistic person. And it's a fantastic song, and it's just really an excuse to mention the song and then encourage you to go and watch the video, which is really funny and creative. So yay, Peach Pit. Keep up the good work, lads. So to conclude, I want to share another quote, and I'm going to share a quote by Mark. Mark, sorry I didn't ask your permission, but I hope it's okay. I think Mark is a suitably generic enough name for you not to be identified. Lots of Marks in the world. Anyway, let's crack on. He said, "Rejection has always been hard, but understanding the double empathy problem provided a new perspective to look back on life events and feel less critical." And I think this is crucial, otherwise I wouldn't be sharing it in the video, and otherwise I wouldn't be sharing it at the very end to conclude, because I think it's a really important message to finish up on. I have suffered with rejection for so many years. I have felt like a bad person. I have felt that the problem is me. The problem isn't me. The problem is the double empathy problem. I am on a different wavelength to most people. I can't connect with other people, a lot of people, because they're neurotypical. There's just that divide that we can't overcome because we have different brains. We've got different perspectives on life. We can have different ways of communicating. We just can't quite, like magnets, just can't quite meet in the middle. It's not my fault, and it's not a neurotypical person's fault. It's just that we have different brains, differently structured brains. I'm autistic, they're not. But that said, I'm going to roam back on this quote. That said, while I know that sort of intellectually, having looked at Mark's quote and obviously read about double empathy, the double empathy problem, and done a deep dive into autism and made these YouTube videos for about a year and a half, while I know sort of intellectually that there is such a thing as a double empathy problem, emotionally it does still hurt to know that I just can't connect with a lot of people through no fault of my own. So there still is that sort of sense of rejection. But looking back at life events, I am less critical about myself, knowing about the double empathy problem. There are plenty of times in my life when like I just said, I felt like I was the problem, that I'd done something wrong. Knowing what I know now about autism and the double empathy problem, I can look back at those episodes and go, actually, there was just that divide because of the way that our brains are wired differently, and it wasn't me, it wasn't them, it was just, we were destined to not quite connect. But diversity makes the world go round. We don't all have the same minds. We should accept that, and it makes life interesting. So I had hoped to make Glastonbury more interesting, which sounds horribly arrogant, probably because it is. Someone else has got the place, and good luck to them. I'm not bitter about their inclusion at my expense whatsoever. Rejection is part of everyone's life. I'm not saying it's a uniquely autistic thing to experience, of course not. And I could have mentioned rejection in the context of romantic relationships, because obviously that's a big theme. I'm not going to talk about that right now. That's not because I've not been rejected romantically. It just wasn't the type of rejection that I wanted to focus on in this video. But, if there's a big demand, if like 3 people ask me to make that sort of video, then I will consider it and probably make it. But no, I just wanted to talk about rejection in a very general sense. But yeah, any thoughts, any suggestions related to the theme of rejection or other themes, of course, let me know in the comments below or email me. And yeah, let's keep talking about autism and our autistic experiences, all with a view to making the world a more accepting place for autistic people. And I'm sounding horribly preachy. I do apologize, but I do have a habit of doing that. See? Super self-critical all the time, that constant monologue, do better, do better. But I'm autistic, I'm over-analytical, and I'm rambling. So I'm going to leave it there. Take care in the meantime between now and when I make the next video. And thank you for listening. See you soon.